morning, everyone, and welcome to this dissemination series of the LIFE DICET project on linking emission trading systems. I have the pleasure today of introducing you our interviewee, Dr. Zuelclady Araujo from Mexico. Zuel is a biologist with a master in economics and public policy and a PhD in public policy. Welcome, Zuel. She currently is a researcher in the Integrated Biosphere Future Research Group at IIASA, the Integrated International Institute for Applied System Analysis. And she's specializing in climate change policies and economic analysis. And particularly, she's working on climate change mitigation and the REDD+ mechanisms, where Zuel and I collaborated many years ago in Mexico. Also, Zuel has been part of the discussions around the structuring of the ETS system in Mexico. So it's our great pleasure to have you here today, Zuel. Welcome.
Thank you, Rosa.
Welcome, Zuel. So let me start asking you one question around your participation in the carbon market policy dialogue last week on the 7th of July on aligning emission trading systems, barriers and opportunities. So from your participation in that day, what do you think would be your take-home messages on advantages and challenges of linking ETS systems?
Well, I think that first we need to recognize that the countries are in different stage regarding the development of the carbon market. So we need to consider the point where they are and the different needs that they have. I think it's hard to start thinking to establish a price or something in common for all the different countries when most of them are facing problems or facing challenges to define an ETS in their own areas, in their own markets, and to define which sectors are going to participate, how are they going to do the accounting rules for this type of projects, and how they are going to be able to align this with their indices and also with your LTS. So there are many challenges, not only regarding how we are going to communicate these mechanisms. For sure, it's something that is really interesting for the countries, at least in Latin America, because it's a good opportunity to use their forests or the offsets that they can produce in the different sectors to start participating in this and to receive some economic incentives for that. So it's important to consider also the transparency framework, and most of the countries are building this transparency framework and their MRB system. So it's important to support them, but also to start giving and sharing some lessons learned about the process and to recognize that even though they today have the capabilities to start participating in a market, selling their offsets to other countries, it's important to also support them to have an accounting and a good way to account their emission and their emission reductions inside a country before start thinking to sell them outside. Because if not, maybe not today, but in 5 years or 10 years, they are going to start facing problems about accounting that they sell something that they don't really have today or that they need to avoid their emissions. So it's something that I think that it's important to take into consideration in that part.
Indeed, Zuel, thank you. So absolutely, the process of constructing this ETS is where quite a few of these countries in Latin America are right now. So maybe you can give us a bit of specificities about the Mexican emission trading system, and also how the Article 6, the negotiation in Glasgow, may have affected the structure of this ETS in Mexico and maybe in other Latin American ETS, Colombia or Brazil or Chile. Thank you, Zuel.
Yes, the case of Mexico is really interesting because it's something that had been working or developing many years ago. The carbon market in Mexico starts as a voluntary market where the private companies decide to invest certain amount of money to buy emission reductions and were more related to neutralize their emissions. Later on, they start being part something more related to government and how they can start enhancing the companies or the private sector in general to reduce their emissions. And with that, they produce a pilot project first 3 years ago to start training them, because at the end, something important is we need to train also the companies and the different stakeholders. So training the companies, defining the sector, defining also how we are going to work. The methodologies, are we going to have an internal methodology? Are we going to use some other methodology from some voluntary standard? And if so, which ones are we going to choose? Also, we need to recognize that some forests or some sectors in Mexico have already developed or participate in this voluntary market. So the idea is not only to enforce something and to have a national ETS, but it's also important to introduce or try to align this with the other initiatives that the countries or the subnational governments have been working for some years or for some period of times to start aligning them. After that, with the pilot program, they train around 100 of companies to start understanding the way that this is going to work, and also the possibilities to reduce or to produce their offsets. If they're going to be able to produce them as emission reduction, if they're going to be able to buy it, and to whom. That's a big opportunity for the forestry sector to start participating in this, to start generating these compensation mechanisms. And with this is, at the beginning, is going to be a kind of voluntary program for the first years as the first stage. And then the idea is that all the companies that have more than 25,000 emissions per year are going to participate in this mechanism. And the idea is to start thinking a way to reduce the amount, so we have more companies participating in the mechanism. And in the case of Latin America, we have different examples. In the countries, this type of mechanisms work in a different way. Some of them start with a carbon tax. We also have a carbon tax in Mexico, but it's not exactly linked to the ETS system. But some countries start thinking in this carbon tax, and based on this carbon tax, start building all the network, all the framework that they need to have at ETS. Other countries in early stage, for example, start working with carbon footprints. And it's another way to start. Start with a carbon footprints for the companies. When they already have that, they have the information to decide which ones are going to be able to participate in an ETS market or not, or the amounts that they are going to establish, or also the prices that they need to have. That's the case of Panama, that is start working with this Reduce to Huella program, that it's a little bit different, but it's at the end focused in the private sector. And the idea is to have the different basic information that they have to participate in ETS, and it's something that they are working now. So I think that at the end, what the countries are looking for in the region is to have a good ETS system, first thinking about their internal needs, and based on that, start thinking how they can link this with the other mechanisms. Most of the countries in the region at the beginning start talking with these voluntary markets that we have around the world, and also with some some other governments or subnational governments like the ones in Canada who already have these schemes, and take them as an example, and also to consider the requirements that they have, to think if they are going to be able in a future to communicate or to participate with this type of mechanisms. Sometimes it's not easy because the accounting rules are really different, and they don't have already defined all the scheme with these type of projects are going to play, but at the end, they know the rules. And I think that's a key point, to know the rules of the other players. If you think that maybe at the beginning you are not able to invest or to develop all the different elements that you need to participate in an international carbon market, but maybe at least to have the idea of what do you need to develop. And the other thing is to start thinking in different stations. That's something that in the region have been done, that all the countries start working with the stage and national phase, and then start thinking how they can improve the different elements of this to participate in a future in an international carbon market.
Thank you so much, Zuel. So basically, the situation in most countries in Latin America, it's a building process, learning by doing, some piloting exercises for some of the targeted sectors. I really like the idea of Panama working with this carbon footprinting, different from what Mexico, Colombia, or Brazil are doing. So I think we need to wait a bit for starting linking and thinking what would be the barriers to link these ETS systems. It's also a good moment for these ETS systems to start thinking on the future linking while they're constructing these ETSs right now. So thank you so much, Zuel, for your time. And we hope to host you in Florence, in the Florence School of Regulation at the European University Institute, and some future projects. Thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Bye-bye.
Bye.
With a contribution from the LIFE program of the European Union.